Into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry, and today we're going to be taking a look at the wide receiver free agency market. I'm going to be revealing my top 5 Steelers wide receiver targets for the 2026 offseason. We'll talk about a bunch of different options, but we'll start today's video by kind of breaking down what the Steelers should be looking for at the receiver position and then the top 5 guys that I think fit that bill. Now, before we get into the wide receiver free agency targets today, guys, make sure you check out our website here, chatsports.com/Steelers Talk. You guys have been asking for a long time for a channel branded t-shirt. Well, it's finally here, guys. You can wear this t-shirt on Steelers game days, whether you're at home or you're at Acrisure. You can wear this to Latrobe. In St. Vincent's there for training camp. You can wear it probably not at work, but you never know. So you guys can check us out here, $24.99 on our website right now. You guys have been asking for it for a while, so we got to prove to our bosses here that if you guys want more merch opportunities, that we can sell t-shirts here on Steelers Talk. So chatsports.com/Steelers Talk. Again, just $24.99 to get yours today. That link is down there in the comments and description of today's show if you guys would like to make a purchase. Now, I think that what the Steelers are going to do at the wide receiver position this year, and the two kind of quote-unquote big moves that the Steelers will make at this position this offseason, is number one, they're going to bring in some sort of legitimate veteran starter, whether it's via trade or whether it's via free agency. And then, once we get to the NFL draft, I think there's a very high possibility that they draft a high-end wide receiver prospect, probably in round 1, but maybe round 2 at the very latest, to kind of complete the wide receiver trio here in Pittsburgh alongside, of course, DK Metcalf. And, to kind of complete the right balance here, I think that, what the Steelers are going to be looking for is they're going to be looking to bring in a veteran guy that can start the season as this team's wide receiver 2, but can also operate as this team's wide receiver 3 if, the early round rookie, whether it's Mekhi Lemon, whether it's Jordan Tyson, whether it's Omar Cooper Jr., whether it's Casey Concepcion, if one of those guys balls out, it's going to be somebody that can maybe take a back seat and be a wide receiver 3 and would be okay with that kind of role here in the Steel City. So you got to strike that right balance there of somebody that's good enough to start the season as wide receiver 2, but maybe finish the season as wide receiver 3 if you're going to address this position in free agency. So coming up here on Steelers Talk, my top 5 Steelers free agency targets when it comes to the wide receiver position. That's coming up here in just a second. But first, what say you guys? Let me know down there in the comment section. How will Pittsburgh acquire their veteran wide receiver this offseason? Do you think they make a trade for a wide receiver like A.J. Brown, or do you think they go to free agency to find that wide receiver too? Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. This will be the pinned comment on today's show. Just a second here, I'm going to tell you about our sponsor today at Polymarket. And while I tell you about our sponsor today, let me know T for trade or F for free agency. Before we continue on with the rest of today's show, let's see what I've been trading on Polymarket. During Week 18's Pittsburgh-Baltimore matchup in Week 18 from this past year, Polymarket only gave Pittsburgh a 38% chance to win that game, which I thought was crazy because of the history between Pittsburgh and Baltimore and how close these games always tend to be. So for that reason, I took Pittsburgh at 38% to win that game, and I won $263 on just $100. Plus, with Polymarket, you can trade in and out of momentum shifts without getting blocked or penalized. With in-game trading, once Pittsburgh gets up, you can either ride it all the way through to the end of the game for a bigger payout, or you can sell early. For example, if you bought Pittsburgh at 38% in this particular football game and sold at just 70%, you could have snagged a cool $184 payout. You can't do this with a traditional sports book, so get started today. Polymarket is legal in all 50 states. Download the app now to get to the top of the wait list. The only way to do that is by clicking my link in the description and comments. And a big thank you to Polymarket for sponsoring today's edition of Steelers Talk. So we'll start our list here with a name that Steelers fans are very familiar with, and it is Aaron Rodgers' former teammate there in Green Bay, Romeo Doubs. Right now, the market value, according to The Athletic, is 4 years, $15.2 million per season. I think that's around the price point that the Steelers are going to be looking at. And Doubs is exactly the type of wide receiver the Steelers are looking at, somebody that's a big body, but also can separate versus man coverage. Is a really good route runner, very snappy at the end at the top end of his routes, and he's still only 26 years old, right? 6'2", 204, so good size. But, this is somebody that has established chemistry with Aaron Rodgers as well. He's going to run routes the way that Rodgers wants them to be run, and somebody that Rodgers is going to trust on day one of Steelers training camp, let alone week one of the 2026 NFL season. And you guys can see here that Doubs has had, some decent success in his National Football League career. This past year was his best season at 724 yards on the year. That's almost 300 yards more than any other receiver on the Steelers roster last year. He also collected 6 touchdowns. As a big body guy, he collects quite a few touchdowns each and every season, and he's been able to stay relatively healthy. He does have a little bit of a drop issue, but I think that's a little bit of a trade-off that the Steelers might be willing to account for because of his connection with Aaron Rodgers, because of his ability to separate versus man coverage. If the Steelers are looking for like a true wide receiver 2 of the future, I think Romeo Doubs fits that description really, really well. But another guy that hasn't, at the time of me recording this video, has not been released yet, but is potentially expected to be released by the Colts, Michael Pittman Jr. If he hits the open market, I would be interested in Pittman for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, it's possible that Pittman gets traded, and maybe the Steelers are the team that trades for him, but right now, nobody has bitten on that cheese just yet, and I do think that it's possible that we get to free agency and the Colts feel obligated to let him go because, they need cap relief this year to pay for Daniel Jones and probably Alec Pierce as well. Now, Pittman is 28 years old, so he's getting up there, and he's never been like a terrific athlete. He's not going to be the downfield vertical threat for the Steelers offense if they get him, but he's a big body type of guy who's really, really good as a snappy route runner to the short and intermediate levels of the field. He's got really tough hands. He's a great red zone threat. And he's just a very, nifty wide receiver is the best way I can describe it, where, he's just really smart. He knows how to sit down in those zones. He's a good route runner that can separate. I think he's pretty snappy at the top of his routes. And, right now, his current contract is paying him $23.3 million per season. I'd be interested to see what he would actually get paid on the open market, but, I think that, around that $20 million range is probably what he would go for, and you guys can see what he's been able to do over the last several years, and, he's been a very good player, multiple touchdowns, 7 touchdowns just last year in the full 17-game schedule, but he had 80 catches, back in 2023. That was his best year with over 1,100 yards receiving and over 100 receptions, and, this is certainly somebody that is a wide receiver 2-esque wide receiver in my opinion. And I think that if the Steelers can get him and get him for a decent price tag, I think that he's more than worth it for the black and gold and would be a good complement to DK Metcalf on the other side. Then we get to Jauan Jennings, who we've talked about on this channel before as a potential trade target and all these different things. He's had some quarrels with the San Francisco 49ers in recent years. Right now, The Athletic projects his next contract at 29 years old as a 3-year deal worth $14 million per season. Now, Jennings, I think in the previous regime here in Pittsburgh with Arthur Smith, who really values receivers that can run block, I think that he would have been the perfect fit for the Arthur Smith offense, but I still think he would fit in Mike McCarthy's system here where, he's a big body route runner, very similar to Michael Pittman Jr. in that way where they're not fast guys, but they are very nuanced route runners. They have great footwork, and they get open. They make tough catches, man, and Jauan is somebody that I've had my eye on for a while, and you guys can see here over the last 4 years, he's had some good years, he's had some down years, but, when Brandin Ayuk went down with his injury in 2024, he became the 49ers' number 1 receiving weapon and nearly got to 1,000 yards receiving. Over the last 2 years, he's collected 15 touchdowns, so this is a legitimate big boy receiver, but at the end of the day, he's 29, he's kind of used to being almost like a wide receiver 3, like if the Steelers bring him in as a wide receiver 2 to start the season, but then like Jordan Tyson plays awesome in year 1 or something like that, I don't think Jennings is going to be out of place as a wide receiver 3 either. But then Calvin Ridley, another guy that hasn't been released at the time of me recording this video, but another guy that I expect to be released by the time we get to free agency. Right now, the market value on him would be unknown, but Ridley was somebody that I was interested in as a potential trade target last year at the deadline. He didn't have the best of times there with Cam Ward last season, but he still has that great combination of size, speed, and route running ability that would maybe make him the ideal wide receiver 2 here in Pittsburgh. Now, his current contract pays him $23 million per season. I think if he hits the market, he will get less than that. I think that's a big reason why Tennessee might be letting him go. But last year, just 303 yards in just 7 games played, dealt with injuries as well. But, he's been one of those guys over the last 2 years in particular where, he is super efficient. 17.8 yards per reception last year, 15.9 working with Will Levis in 2024, had over 1,000 yards in both 2024 and 2023, racked up quite a few touchdowns as well, and pairing him up as a really dynamic route runner with DK Metcalf could be a really good fit if the Steelers are looking for a veteran wide receiver 2 at a pretty decent price point. But then the final name I'll talk about here is kind of a different type of receiver than the other guys that are on the list here, but Deebo Samuel is somebody that I don't want people to sleep on here, okay? And right now, The Athletic projects his contract at 1 year, $12.5 million. That's probably what the Steelers are looking to pay on the free agency market, especially if they're looking to draft a receiver in round 1. Deebo's 30 years old, and he's certainly had his better days. He has lost a step athletically, but he, despite that, is still one of the top run-after-catch threats in the NFL today. He's still awesome at it. He can still align anywhere from outside to the slot to even in the backfield. He's got better hands than he gets credit for. And Pittsburgh has actually attempted to acquire Deebo Samuel via trade multiple times in the past, including at the NFL trade deadline last year. And apparently the Washington Commanders just didn't want to let him go for some reason. But the issue with Deebo, guys, is that he isn't a route runner. And that's probably what you're saying at home. But Jack, we need a route runner to separate versus man coverage. And I completely agree with you on that. That is Deebo's issue. But you could get that guy in the NFL draft. Like, there's a number of awesome route runners that you can get in round 1 of the NFL draft this year. And the thing about Deebo is that he is, an awesome rack threat, run after catch. And as we know, if Aaron Rodgers is going to be returning here, he likes those quick dump offs. He likes those wide receiver screens. He likes those crossing routes. And that's exactly what Deebo Samuel loves to do. So if you have DK Metcalf, who's like a vertical threat and a yak threat, big body dude, then you got Deebo Samuel, another big bodied guy that's a great run after catch threat. And then you can add an awesome dynamic route running threat in the draft. That would complete a wide receiver trio that could really work with a skill set like Aaron Rodgers at the quarterback position. And at the end of the day, guys, I don't want anyone to be surprised if Deebo Samuel becomes a Pittsburgh Steeler this year, especially if the price point is where it's at with The Athletic right now at $12.5 million, right? And it's just a 1-year deal. So at the end of this year, Rodgers probably retires, Deebo moves on, and then you have another opening in the wide receiver position. But you got DK, you've got your round 1 wide receiver, and then you can, add another guy in the 2027 offseason. That shouldn't be that difficult to do. But in terms of the 2026 season, I think Deebo Samuel makes a lot of sense for this football team. But then some other wide receiver possibilities. I wouldn't consider any of these guys as like wide receiver 2s. I would put these guys more in the wide receiver 3 categories. Like maybe you bring in one of these guys as a wide receiver 3, and then, you're expecting that round 1 rookie to be your number 2 receiver right away, whether it's Mekhi Lemon, whether it's Jordan Tyson, whether it's Omar Cooper Jr. Like Darnell Mooney and Hollywood Brown, those 2 guys, and I would also include Tyquan Thornton, are awesome, fast vertical threats that would be really good number 3 options in the Steelers offense. Jalen Tolbert, apparently Mike McCarthy's really high on him. If you can get him for like the vet minimum, could see him being a depth piece. Christian Kirk is a good slot weapon, and Brandin Cooks actually showed some good things with Josh Allen and the Bills towards the end of last season, and he had some really good years with Mike McCarthy in Dallas. It wouldn't shock me if the Steelers bring him in as a rotational depth piece in the receiver room for the vet minimum. But of course, the Steelers could also bring back Calvin Austin III. That's always going to be an option. Now, I do think Calvin is probably hunting, as big of a contract as he can get. He just hired Drew Rosenhaus as his agent, which usually means I'm trying to get paid this offseason. So we'll see where Calvin ends up. He's, a shifty guy. He's got some good speed to him. He's a spot guy where he can really make some big plays for you, and he's awesome on special teams. But I think he proved last year he's nothing close to a wide receiver 2, and I think he's going to want to get paid like a wide receiver 2 this offseason. Don't think the Steelers are going to bite on that. Now, I want to talk about some options here that I'm probably not super interested in, but names that you've probably heard connected to the Steelers. These three guys right here, Tyreek Hill coming off that massive knee injury, Brandon Ayuk also coming off a massive knee injury and has off-field issues. And then Stephon Diggs dealing currently with some legal issues. All these guys are good players when they're healthy and they're on the field, and they can help the Pittsburgh Steelers from a football perspective. I just don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze in terms of what you have to deal with these guys off the field, personality-wise, all that different stuff, and not to mention the injuries specifically to Hill and Ayuk. I'm probably passing on pursuing these guys in free agency this year. But then there's guys that I believe are going to be too expensive for the roles that they would have to play here in Pittsburgh. Alec Pierce from the Colts is about to get an absolute bag from somebody. Right now, The Athletic projects a $25.5 million per year contract for him. It would not shock me if he gets more than that on the open market, because there's not a ton of like high-end receivers that are really young on the open market this year. Pierce is going to be one of the top, if not the top receivers that you're going to hear his name called on Monday, probably to somebody. But you know, he's a deep threat. He's not much of a true route runner, which is something that I think the Steelers need. And if the Steelers are just going to get a true deep threat, I think there's a lot of guys that are much cheaper that can do something very similar to Alec Pierce, maybe at a smaller size, but can do a similar function. Wan'Dale Robinson from the Giants, I think he had a lot of inflated stats last year because, you know, the Malik Neighbors went down with an injury and all this different stuff. I think he's a decent slot number 3 weapon, but right now, 3 years, $16 million per season is just too much for me, guys. Rashid Shaheed, somebody that I would like to bring in as a wide receiver 3, as that true deep threat. I think he's a better version of Calvin Austin III. But for $13 million per season, that's a bit too rich for me. And then Jalen Naylor, somebody that I consider, you know, an okay wide receiver 3, showed some good things on tape last year for Minnesota. It has the connection with Brian Angelico, our new offensive coordinator, but $12 million per season for Naylor is too much. I saw KJ Osborne play really well in that Vikings offense because Justin Jefferson and the guys around him, and then, you know, he goes somewhere else and he's just not a good football player. I'm worried that we see a similar dip in Naylor's game once he gets outside of that Vikings offense. But predict it for me down there in the comment section. Which veteran receiver does Pittsburgh add to the starting lineup this offseason? And this can be trade or free agent here, guys. Do you think they trade for A.J. Brown? Do you think they trade for Brian Thomas Jr.? Do they sign Deebo Samuel or Romeo Doubs? Like, who is your guy? Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. That'll be it for today's show here on Steelers Talk. I appreciate you guys stopping by here today. Of course, if any breaking news action happens over the course of the day here, we're going to have you covered here on Steelers Talk. So if you don't want to miss any of that, click that subscribe button if you haven't already.